Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of A Walk in My Shoes. I will be your host today, and my name is Kayla. Today we have with us Krystal, who is an acupuncturist. Welcome, Krystal, and thanks for being with us on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to tell us a little about what your role is, what your career does. I was looking up on Google today some of the different things. I wasn't quite sure of all the tasks that you have weekly. So if you want to just dive
Right.
into what you do.
Right. Have you ever been to acupuncture? Have you
I
ever
have
heard of it?
not. I've definitely heard of it. I've heard of other folks in my circle going, but not myself. I am a little bit of a chicken.
So I think I'll tell you a little bit more about what acupuncture is, and then kind of like what happens in a treatment room, because that is helpful for knowing kind of like what else my role is.
Okay.
And so um, usually people so I first got introduced to acupuncture when I just moved to Columbus, and I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was living in San Francisco and in Oakland. And my sister, although I'm from New York, we were both living there. And my sister was the first one to get acupuncture. And I said to her, "You're letting people put needles in what? For what?" And I was like, just because we're living in California does not mean you can get all new agey on me. It was the thing. So the fact that now I'm an acupuncturist is like the funniest thing. It's one of the funniest things ever for me. And so what happens in acupuncture, I think of it like both acupuncture and what we call traditional Chinese medicine, is that it looks at the body like a garden. Okay. And so just like in your garden, if something's not growing the way that you want, you have to do a lot of investigation. You have to be like, is it the soil? Is it too clayey? Is it too acidic? Is there enough sun? Is there too much sun? Is there enough water? Is there too much water? Are there enough beneficial creatures like earthworms? Or are there too many aphids? Kind of like it all depends on how the health of like what that one corner of the garden is doing. And I
Right.
think that Western medicine, the doctors that we're used to, allopathic medicine, I think looks at your body much more like a machine, and so when something is wrong, you think of it um, like a part you can change or take out. Maybe you solve it with surgery, maybe you solve it with drugs, but it's less about how everything is working together. And so acupuncture really looks at how the whole system is working and how to balance that system. And how to balance that system. And so we do part of how we talk about that system's balance is through what we call Qi. Um, if you studied like karate or Aikido, you've heard of Qi before. And Qi means life energy, and it means life energy in the woo-woo kind of way, as well as what the mitochondria are doing in your cells, in the microbiome. So Qi means all those things. And acupuncture looks to balance the Qi for your overall health. It's kind of like it brings what is excess back down and helps what is deficient rise back up. And so with acupuncture, kind of like, just like when you water your garden, it's not just the rose bush that gets healthy. Kind of when you do acupuncture, everything kind of your general wellness gets improved kind of all at once. And so there are lots of, oh, sorry, don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said, wow. I'm just nodding.
Yeah. So the World Health Organization, which is part of the UN, and we've heard a lot about the World Health Organization because of all the COVID stuff.
Mhm.
They several years ago, they put together like a pamphlet, and that had like 31 things that acupuncture was good for, that was tested and studied, and 31 things that it looks like it's good for, or even more perhaps looks like it's good for, and that might need further studies. And then another list of things that's like, oh, we haven't well studied this, but we don't have there are no real good ways to treat these. And acupuncture looks like it's promising. And so acupuncture is good for everything from pain to women's issues to acne to TMG, I don't know, low back pain. There are lots of things that acupuncture is good for. Yeah, that
Wow.
people come into acupuncture for.
Awesome. Well, that was definitely a great overview of what acupuncture is.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So, could you talk a little bit about your schedule? Um, are you in an office right now? Do you work from home? Do you even have a home office? Was that an option for you during COVID? Um, and what does your patient schedule look like?
Yeah. So um, there is no, well, I guess you could have a home office. I am part of a practice. And so we have an office location, which is what we practice out of. Um, Theoretically, I think you could have a home office, but you can't work remotely for acupuncture. For some things you can begin to see people like telemedicine. And so
Mhm.
there's some things, especially with the herbal medicine, where you can begin to look at people and see and do the diagnostic. But it is very much a hands-on medicine. We have a couple of diagnostics that we use. One of them is that we look at the tongue, which we can do kind of remotely. And then another one is that we take the pulses um, in several different positions that tell us a lot for our own diagnosis. Um, and so it's hard to do that. Although people are experimenting with lots of different things, it's hard to do that remotely. And then there is, the acupuncture treatment, right? And so the acupuncture treatment is like when you come in, especially for your first time, there'll be a really extensive intake um, process. I say acupuncture requires us to be very aware of our bodies. I think of it like in those movies where they're chasing people in the forest, and like there's that one guy who sees the blade of grass twisted like that, and he's like, that means this happened, and then that happens. And so acupuncture, it looks for those little blades of grass, and so the first intake can be very long, and people will often be like, I did think of that. And because we're looking for the whole garden, you might come in for a headache and be like, why are you asking me about my bowel movements? Like, but for us, it tells us how the whole garden is going.
Right.
So that can be done offline, but then, then you come in and you're laying down on a treatment table, and we have the acupuncture needles, which are about the size or the thickness of a strand of your hair. So when I was in school, one of my colleagues, classmates, put 100 acupuncture needles in a hypodermic. So, when we're used to getting a shot, everybody's like, we're used to getting a shot, but really acupuncture needles are very, very thin. And there is some sensation, but yeah, but I've had patients be like, it's worse. It hurts more to get a paper cut. Paper cuts hurt more. Or, one woman said that she told her mom, she was like, it hurts much more to get your eyebrows plucked. And she was like, that's a bad example, because it really, really hurts to get your eyebrows plucked. And like, it's never hurt that much with each of the needles. And so, we have to be in the same room for that to happen. And so I put in the needles, and then people stay on the table and relax for several moments. And most people, you know, um, yeah, like thoroughly relax and come off the table feeling better than when they came in. And so all of that kind of has to happen face to face. And is a little bit harder. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's harder to do. So it needs to happen. So when everything closed down for COVID, for a little bit, we never closed completely down. We closed down for all but like essential services. So people coming in for pain, and acupuncture is very, very good for all sorts of pain. Very, very effective for all sorts of pain. Very effective and not addictive, like where like what is happening with the pain medications. It's an excellent alternative. And so we were still open for some of those cases. We were still open. We do a lot of fertility work, and helping people really get ready to be pregnant and have pregnant. So we stayed open for those kinds of essentials, and pieces. So we stayed open for the essentials, but we spaced people out. We didn't have more than a couple of, more than me and the patient, in our whole, like in our whole office, kind of like
Wow.
in the whole building. We still continually wear masks. Like it's very unusual. This is the first time in a year that I've had lipstick on because I'm always wearing a mask. So
Right.
so I got dressed up for you today. But yeah, I was like, I was like, where is my lip gloss? I can't find it because, like everybody, we have, that we stay masked, and we ask people, we do the screening that comes in. Um, in acupuncturists, we've always been, one of the parts in which we're trained is to prevent infectious diseases. And so we always had a really good cleaning thing, or, like a really good like transition policy that
Mhm.
that we amped up a little bit. Like for this set that we amped up when we thought you could really catch it off of, when we still thought you could catch it off of the surfaces, that we've kept
Mhm.
up. Um, yeah, and so yeah, so we've been really safe, and we've tried to very hard to be really safe, because we see people who, like we've seen people who are going through cancer. We've seen people who could be compromised. And so we want to make sure that this always remains a really safe, really healthy place for people to come.
Right. Right. Well, that's awesome. So you talked a lot about that people come to see you when they're going through an issue, whether they have pain or fertility issues. Do
Right.
you have folks that come see you when they don't have pain or aren't experiencing something? Is this a type of relief, such as a massage? I don't have
Right.
to be having a physical pain to go see a
Right.
masseuse.
So you can definitely come to acupuncture for general wellness. You can also come to acupuncture for, like, we're very good for anxiety and stress.
Okay.
We're very good for burnout prevention. We're very good for some of the more emotional pieces. One of the beautiful parts about acupuncture is like the same point on your body that's good for asthma is also good to help build your immune system, and it's
Mm.
also good for grief. And so, like it's really is a mind, body, spirit medicine. And
Wow.
so, you can definitely, you can, so I will say that more likely people are coming, because of something, because they're feeling out of balance in some ways, right? Whether it is physically, whether it is emotionally, whether it is, that people are feeling out of balance. That's usually what drives people to come in. I think people keep coming in because they feel well, like, so I saw somebody who what's about the sheet, she's like, I always forget how good I feel when I leave. Like I don't understand why I wait so long to come, because I always forget how good I do feel when I leave. And I say that most of the side effects from acupuncture are good things, like mostly you sleep better, like mostly you feel more peaceful, mostly your digestion improves. That's usually, that's most of what happens as part of the side effects. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us, Krystal, a little bit about how you even got into acupuncture? How did
Yeah.
you know, like, I want to try this out?
Yeah, I told you this story about my sister. And I was at the time I was teaching, and I was in education, and I was working at a youth leadership and development organization and a community development organization. And it was a holistic, I've always worked in places, even the schools that I taught in. I have always been concerned about holistic things. And so I've always worked in places that really tried to address like just many different aspects of people. And so I was working in a holistic organization that I was part of the career and education part. So I would do what you're doing. We would do different things about helping people. We worked with 14 to 24 year olds. And so, I would help people get jobs, get their first jobs, go back to school, finish their GEDs. We had a big arts department. And so people could do CDs or tape themselves. They did dance, they made murals, all this stuff. And then there was this health and wellness department where people could get counseling, and there was a doctor's clinic on site. And then there was an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, and a chiropractor who would come work with the young people and work with the staff twice a week. We had a grant. And so I got to have acupuncture every week. And because we were working with young people, it was enough. Like sometimes you walk in and like it's very peaceful and it's very spa-like. This time we were all in the conference room, and it was enough for the cell phones to be put away, but people would always talk. And maybe I'm disconnected. Are you still there? Oh,
I
sorry,
am
having
here.
a little. Okay, good. Um, and so what happened? What would happen is that I would go, and the young people would come in, and I would see people getting acupuncture, and I would get acupuncture, and people would start asking questions like, why does my headache go away when you put a needle in my toe? Like, what is this? And they would come in and like come in with problems like, oh, I brought in my little sister because she's not sleeping well, and that would be, or they would come in from having hurt themselves, physically in kickboxing class, and they would come in and they would get treated, and they would just talk about it. They would talk about how the chi felt in their bodies, what was going on, like where they were feeling it. And it became so fascinating to me that I began like reading books and being like, well, how is this working? And, and the first acupuncture texts were written 2,500 years ago. And I was like, what are we still doing that people did 2,500 years ago, before the birth of Christ, like that we're still doing, that still works. And so I began studying it, and it kept fascinating me, and kept fascinating me, and it kept fascinating me. And I kind of did what I could as like a hobby. And then I was like, well, you might as well try it. I mean, I was like, you might as well try it. Like if it doesn't work, you'll always find a job. And so I had to go back to school. You have to kind of take the same prereqs that you would for med school, because you do we learn how to be integrative. If I see something, I have to be able to make referrals to doctors and be able to make referrals to the right specialists, be able to tell people that there's, what's working or what's dangerous. And so, I had to take the anatomy and the pathophysiology and all of those. We have to take all of those classes, and then you have to learn the medicine, and it's a different paradigm. And so, and you have to learn how to think differently. What I say is that that Western medicine and Chinese medicine look at the body the way that a poet and a physicist look at the sunset. So at some points they're talking about the exact same thing, and at some points they're talking about very different things. And so you have to learn how to think differently, and then how to translate it into how we drink now. And so so it takes about 4 years. You have to get a master's. It takes about 4 years, and then you have to constantly pass tests. You have to constantly pass tests in the beginning. But and then it's also fabulous to see it working. My very first patient had a rotator cuff and could not move his arm. And after and this is with a bunch of students. After I would say after 10 sessions, he was able to raise his arm all the way like this. And I was like, oh my god, I'll never be worse. I'll never be worse. Right? It will never be worse than right now. And if I can help him like this with him being my first patient, then I just keep testing the medicine, and it keeps working. I'm a New Yorker originally. I was born and raised in New York, and so there's always a part of me that's a skeptic. There's always a part of me that's like, are you sure this isn't, are you sure this isn't whatever, pretend or whatever? But it keeps working. So it keeps working. It keeps being effective, and so I keep doing it. Yeah.
Detail that you go into, you can tell that you're very passionate about what you do. And it's awesome to hear that you're helping people each and every day overcome obstacles in their life. Have there been obstacles in your career that you have faced and you're like, wow, this is a lot? How am I going to get past this?
I think there is well, I think there are always. So I think the first obstacle is and maybe every obstacle always comes for me at least. Let's see if that's true. I think that's true. Every obstacle always comes down to fear for me. So I had a good job that I liked. And I was like, are you gonna leave this to do this other thing, like weird, this weird piece, and that for me was the first fear. And then there was a lot of schooling and a lot of learning and a lot of studying and a lot of tests. And so that was also the big fears. Like there are several big tests that you always have to take and you have to pass at several points to actually go on. And in some ways you have to know so much information or so much information can be asked about that it feels very overwhelming. And so those were big career hurdles and things. And then it always feels it's scary to set up a shop where you have to have patience, and you're never quite so sure who's going to show up. Like when COVID hit, it was like, oh, are we ever going to see people? Are we going to see people? And is this going to work? Are people going to come back? All of those. It is building a business is also scary, like going over that heaps. But I feel like all of the obstacles for me has been primarily about me overcoming my own fear, and me. I don't know. I guess it's really Really me building my own faith, I guess, and being willing to step out in faith with the pieces, and and being willing to put in, like homework. There's always some elbow grease, like like involved, and I think that there is still research and study. Every with my patients, I'm always reviewing their cases,
and I'm
and I'm
always
always
looking, and I'm
looking, and I'm
always,
always
making
making
sure
sure
that
that
I
I
am
am doing the
doing the
best
best
possible
possible
treatments
treatments
that I
that I
can.
can.
There
There
is
is
like
like
just
just
this
this
weekend,
weekend,
I
I
spend
spend
18 hours. I spent 2 9-hour days, like sitting and learning with master teachers, with somebody who's been doing acupuncture for 35 years, with my list of questions to, to learn so that I could, like be even better, be even more improved. So that is, yeah, that I feel those are the main, like there are always, yeah, those are I think the major hurdles. There are a lot of hoops to, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. In terms of licensing, in terms of passing your tests, in terms of graduating, in terms of licensing, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. But for me, the biggest ones have been really about me being able to get over my fear, like, and not letting the gremlins, the parts of you that's like, oh, why you can't do this, da, 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 you won't be good enough to do this, nobody will come, this, da, blah, blah, to put aside the gremlins in my head. I think that has been the biggest obstacle, to continually put aside the gremlins.
Right. Yeah. Well, it definitely sounds like you don't let anything stop you or put you down. That's for sure. That you work through it in a positive way.
Yeah.
So you did.
So there is
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking there is, so traditional Chinese medicine has 5 components. One is acupuncture, one is herbs, one is a massage called Tuina, the idea of a massage called Tuina. One is Qigong, and Qigong is, like Qigong is an energy work. And it's a little bit like Tai Chi is one of the forms of Qigong that people have done. And it's an energy work that you do with yourself, but that you can also do on the table. And I found that to be really helpful to also be, to also be actively, like actively using the medicine myself. And then the 5th part of traditional Chinese medicine is around dietary pieces. And so eating well. And so also when you come into an acupuncturist, I might give you all these things, be like, like I tell people to meditate every day, for a lot of the conditions and things like that. So in part doing all of that has helped me as well stay, like stay grounded, and stay forward moving as well.
Awesome. So a little bit ago, you mentioned about your education and how it's almost like med school when you start out, and there was a bunch of testing for you in the beginning. What about now? Do you have to continue your education? Do you have to stay up to date on certifications? Are there other courses that you personally want to take to keep growing and to keep educating yourself? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I like acupuncture is that it asks you, like it demands that you be a lifelong learner. And there is just so much to learn. But then you also required to be a lifelong learner. So we have 2 certifications that you have to keep current in order to be practicing as an acupuncturist. One of them is through the National Committee for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, I believe,
Okay.
is the thing for and that is kind of like, that's within that is within the profession. And then you also have on top of that your Ohio license with the medical board. And so both those things require a certain amount of continuing education. And so that's one of the things I was doing last weekend was some continuing education. And
Okay.
so you have to, yeah, you can do it in a variety of different ways, but you have to be doing about 60 hours every 4 years in order to keep up your license. Yeah. So that is yeah, it's an essential part. And like I said, it's the part that right now I still think that it's fabulous. And I still think that it's because yeah, it's one of the things I love to learn. Like I'm one of those people who likes to go to the museums when they travel, like and things like that. So I'm a little, yeah, I'm a little geeky nerdy. So that is one of the pluses for me of this medicine.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. If you love what you do, you wanna keep learning and growing with your occupation.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So would you consider this your dream job?
So interesting. Sure. It's so funny. I don't have a like I really in I do because I really love what I do. That is very true. And I love seeing people get better. Like that is also true. And I love there is also there's often the element for me at least of surprise. Like people get better in the ways that I predict and people get better in ways that I don't predict. And so that's also like lovely to see and lovely to do. I don't know if I would have been able to dream this. When I was 18, I would never have said, "Oh, this is what you're going to end up doing." When I was 28, I don't think I would have said. When I was 38, when I was 38, yeah. Also, would not have said that this is what I would be doing. And so so I think that, so that is the part of it. Like I didn't have an aspiration. Like when I started experimenting, I was like, oh yeah, this would be what I would like to do. This is coming in to be what I would like to do. But I didn't, like I was able to more follow what fascinated me. With this medicine, I get to follow what fascinates me. And so I feel very lucky and blessed to have that happen. And but if people but it was never, I don't know if it was, you know, like when people say, what's your 10-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? I'm like, I don't know. like I think that if I keep just meeting what happens, it will be lovely. But I have no idea what that plan, yeah, is.
Oh, well, if we had youth and young adults watching today that are very interested in your line of work, or this is the first time they're hearing about acupuncture, but they want to look more into this field of work, do you have any advice for them or any first steps that you think that they should take?
Yes. So what was helpful for me when I was first thinking about it was I called up people and I did informational interviews to see what it was really like. And I really recommend that. I have found acupuncturists to be very generous with their time. I think you should be planful, so like really come up with a list of questions, really get a sense of understanding. But I would definitely call up some people and talk with them and see what it's like. Like if you find a couple of people that you jive with, I would then say, and they're open to it. I would then say, like, could you get shadowed or get a treatment. That is also what I would say. I would say get a treatment, because that is also one of the ways to really like see what it is. And to see how, like, and for you to feel better, like you get to see what the medicine's like, how you do it, how you get better. So get a treatment. And then I would say, like if you could shadow, but I think that talking to enough, like if you talked to, I don't know, 10 people, 12 people, you get a good sense of whether it would, like whether it would work for you. Like one of the things for me, because I used to be a teacher and things. So it's very different to work just one-on-one with people. Like that is, like that is different. And it's also it can be very solitary, which is why I like working, we work in a practice. There are 3 of us in this practice. And so it's lovely to work in a practice because you get to interact with people and you get to, but you'll get a sense of, oh, right, what is the reality behind this? And does that, like, does it work? And then there are a couple of lovely books to also read. Some are very explanatory about like how the medicine works. Like Between Heaven and Earth and The Web That Has No Weaver. They're very thick books and pieces like that. But there's also a delightful book by Miriam Lee, Tales of a Senior Acupuncturist, that I really loved because she's the first person to be licensed in acupuncture in the United States.
Wow.
And she talks about, and she was an acupuncturist, I don't know where, in Hong Kong maybe, or Taiwan. I feel embarrassed that I don't know specifically, or I'm not recalling specifically, but she came over and worked for Hewlett Packard, and and people were coming in pain, and so she just started treating people, and the medicine was working, and so more people were referring people to her, and so like she would treat people at 7:00 in the morning before her other job, and people were coming and they were lining up out of, like she rented a little place. They were lining up out of the place to be treated. And eventually the police came and shut her down for practicing medicine without a license, and they put her in jail. And she had to go through court, and all of her patients and everybody came to court to say she's been helping us and we should have access to this medicine. And that's how in California, the first practice law to actually like become an acupuncturist was developed, was really because of Miriam Lee and treating and her having all these great results and meeting all this demand and people lining up. Yeah, so they had to. So in the beginning, people had to fight.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a great book.
That's such an awesome story. I'm actually intrigued. I might have to read that myself.
Yes, it's a little book. It's a good read.
Awesome. Well, we do have a question here from the audience. I know you were very excited about questions.
Yes, we're very excited about questions.
So, we have here, where did you grow up and were you involved in other things outside of school, like sports or any extracurricular activity where you would have had pain or stress, where you would have found acupuncture to be useful?
So lovely. So I grew up in the Bronx. I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York, in the Bronx. And I was very active, although not in sports. I was, oh, God bless. I was not a sports person, but I was very active in extracurricular. I was very active in different organizations that did service. I started different programs when I was in high school. We started a program that like went to younger kids around drug education, and I did all these things. And I always had a job from when I could get when you first get a worker's permit. So I always had that, and I was on the debate team. I had a lot of extracurriculars. I enjoyed doing things. And I think, to be quite honest with you, I think that I might have been afraid to do acupuncture when I mean, maybe if somebody had come to my school like they had done and I had heard people who were doing it, but I think I might have been, like very afraid, right? Because, like, I don't know, because they're needles and yeah, and it's weird. And like, nobody I knew, nobody I knew I had ever done acupuncture, ever talked about acupuncture, ever was exposed to acupuncture. I mean, I just would have, I think I would have had the same reaction that I had when my sister started acupuncture those years later. I was like, what do you do? You can't, this is new agey. This is not, yeah, this is not for you. And so I am so thankful that I got exposed to it and that I was able to do it. And I was able to do it in a way that I saw other people doing it, like, so when people younger than I were getting acupuncture, I was like, oh, maybe, and they were finding it helpful, right? They were finding it helpful, that I began to do it and find it helpful. And it was just, I think I first started doing it just for stress. I had a very intense job. The organization that I worked with uh, dealt with youth in disenfranchised parts of the city, and it was like there were times where there was one span, I think in over 6 weeks, where there were 8 murders before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like within 2 blocks of where the office was. And so it was, and these were the young people that I was working with. And so it was very stressful, and very difficult. And that was, I think, the first reason why I started being like, well, maybe it could, maybe it could help. And it definitely did. And then I got hit by a car.
Oh.
I was walking across the street and I got hit by a car. And I got knocked by the car. I came out of my shoes. I got hit. I came out of my shoes. And thankfully, nothing was broken, but like everything hurt. And then I started getting acupuncture like 3 times a week. And then I started feeling better. And I noticed, oh, when you don't get it 3 times a week, like things start hurting, thing. And then I got better and, and I got well, so that, when other people started, and I don't have any lingering problems, like when it rains, it's not that this part of my body acts up and things like that. And so I think that was the other part that really, like, maybe began to sell me on it. Yeah, and things like that. And so I just really began to see, oh, every time, that I kept getting better. And so that really sold me on it. But yeah, I think you have to go the first time and have people be like, it's not really, yeah, it's not that terrifying and it's not that weird. I think. But yeah, it would have been, yeah, I didn't know anybody who, and it's funny because now that I study, I realized that also one of the first instances of acupuncture being brought to the United States was in the Bronx. In the Bronx, in the South Bronx, there is this hospital called Lincoln Hospital. It was a public hospital, and it was in the 70s. It was just really bad. There would be rats in the emergency room, and kids were going into the hospital for whatever they needed, but they were coming out with lead poisoning, and it was just really bad. And so the Black Panthers, the young lords, and the thing like took over the hospital. And part of what came out of them taking over the hospital was a patient's bill of rights. And also they wanted an outside detox clinic for heroin. And they were doing the research, and they had heard about how acupuncture in the ears can help, was helping people overcome opium addiction. And so they brought it to the South Bronx, and they were treating people for heroin addiction. And that in 10 days they were detoxing people. There's a lovely uh, um, a documentary about it. So, but by that time, it's kind of like that happened, and several things kind of broke that up. And so by the time I was coming up in the Bronx, people didn't even talk about that. People didn't, like we didn't even hear, I didn't even hear about it. It didn't even, it never even came up. So yeah, it was like
Wow.
acupuncture was the thing for rich people, like one of those things that rich people did that nobody else ever did.
Right.
But yeah.
Wow. Well, you're definitely full of some awesome stories. And we've very much enjoyed having you today. Do you have any last words of
Thank you.
advice for our youth and young adults that might be interested in this field? What was their first step be? Um, you mentioned calling around, getting more information. If they wanted to pursue the field, where should they look to sign up for some classes or get a certificate?
So the first Well, like I said, my first step would always be talking to people to see if it really does fit you. I find like it's much more informative than just thinking about it, and kind of a little bit immersing yourself in it. I think that a good so, and then the question is, does it have your heart, or do you still want to dabble in it? Because I do think the testing, there is so much testing and so much education that I think it's better if it has your heart and rather than dabbling. But if you're still not so sure, you're like, oh, I want to see if it has my heart. Um, then I think I would start off with something like or the way that I started was when I was just dabbling. So I read the books. I did an acupressure class to learn more about the points. I kind of like learned about traditional Chinese medicine to learn more, and it kept fascinating me. And then I decided to go to school. I felt like, oh, I did as much as I could. Like I learned acupressure. Shiatsu is based a lot on the same sort of concepts. I learned about the different concepts, and then and I talked to people, and then I kind of bit the bullet and decided to like do do the education. But um, there are acupuncture schools. Since I'm new to Columbus, I don't know as much um, in Ohio. And you also have to think about where you want to practice, because each of the states have a little bit different rules and requirements. And so, yeah. And so like I went to California, which has the most rules. And so most of my education passes for everybody else. But if you actually also want to practice there are different pieces. So there is some investigation to do, but I would call, and there are different schools around, and I would call up the schools and sit in on a class or two and see if you also like that and like the students, like, and do that way as well. Is that enough? That
Awesome.
good enough or
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Crystal, for all the information you shared with us and all of your fun stories. And that's all for this week's edition of A Walk in My Shoes. Thank you again, Crystal, for being with us. And we will see everybody next week on A Walk in My Shoes. Bye bye now.